You're probably making it way harder than it needs to be. I'm predicted 40 stars in my A-Levels and I've only ever used one simple revision system. So in this video today, I'm going to be breaking down that exact 5-step system and you can copy it step by step. Quick heads up before we start, on A-Level results day this year, so August 14th, I'm releasing a 90-minute masterclass for students in year 10 to year 13 to create the perfect personalized revision system, and that's the only one you ever need to use to get your dream grades. So if you're interested in that, sign up to my waitlist down below so you can get 40% off. This is probably not what you were expecting, but step one is to sacrifice within reason. Sacrificing is spoken about a lot on the discipline and the study scene. You have to stop doing one thing so that you can get better at another thing. Now, that makes quite a lot of sense in concept, but the way people interpret this and apply it is terrible. So I've made a little system so that you can choose your sacrifices wisely. The first step of this is to identify your biggest time consumers, so the things that take up most of your time day to day. Those things for me were school, obviously, spending time on my fitness, spending time on my business, spending time with my friends and family, doing homework and revision at home. So just a range of different things that you need to account for in this first step. Step two is to then outline your biggest goals. So if you've got your biggest time consumers, does that actually match up with your goals? So my goals over the past couple of months were get 40 stars in my A-Levels, maintain my physique and my fitness, then to focus on my business as a very small focus. Now, thinking about your goals and how much time you spend on them leads us on to step three. Are you actually spending the right amount of time on your biggest goals as opposed to your smallest goals? I believe with your three biggest focuses, you should be spending about 80% of your efforts on your primary goal, about 15% of your efforts on your secondary goal, and about 5% of your efforts on your smallest goal. So what that looked like for me was 80% focus on my studies and getting my grades, about 15% focus on my fitness, and about 5% focus on my entrepreneurship and my business. And because you're watching a video about how to get the best grades possible, I would assume that your biggest focus would be to get the best grades possible, so focusing on your exams. That means 80% of all of your efforts in terms of productive work and high quality work should be on your studying. Moving on to step two now. We've already spoken about how you should be focusing on your work above anything else. Do we start studying yet? I feel like there's one more thing we have to understand before we can start with our studying process, and that is understanding the difference between processes and routines. What a process is a set of steps that you need to follow in order to achieve a goal. And how that's different to a routine is because when you have loads of different processes for different goals, a routine is putting those processes in order of priority during your day. I believe you need to master both in order to get your results. The reason why you need a process, because a process helps you to study efficiently, organize information, and help you retain information better than studying randomly, doing bits and pieces here and there without really knowing what you're doing. Then I believe a routine puts these processes into action. It makes it more likely you actually carry them out, and when you do them on a more consistent basis, then you're more likely to go and achieve your results. So the next two steps, steps 3 and 4, will first focus on processes, so creating a perfect study process, and then focusing on integrating that process into your own life, so a routine. So step 3 is all about this consistent study process that you'll use for any exam you'll sit. What works for me in terms of a study process may be very different to what works for you. So you need to ask yourself, do I know how I've revised for exams, and does it work? On a very basic level, so I can fit this into like a 7 to 10 minute video, your study process should look something like this if it doesn't already. Learning and understanding new content, reviewing and remembering content, and then testing yourself using practice questions on that content. And that's all you need to do for any study process. Now, it's quite difficult for me to just prescribe methods to you. We have this basic outline of the 3 things that you need to do, but I can't tell you what will work for you. Instead, you've got to find that out yourself. Or if you do want more help with that, as I've mentioned previously earlier on in the video, on the 14th of August, I'm releasing a masterclass which will help you create your own perfect revision system. So your study process and your routine processes will be personalized for you based on what has already worked for you in the past. And I can guarantee that masterclass will help you do that when I release it on the 14th of August. But for now, you've got to use a little bit of past experience. What has worked for you in terms of learning content and remembering content and testing yourself? How have you done that in the past? And you can just put that in a simple study process so that you can rinse and repeat that for every single exam that you sit. Moving on to step 4 now, we have our study process that we can rinse and repeat. How are we going to then integrate that into your own life? The first thing that I ever do when it comes to different routines and different processes I need to integrate is, what time am I willing to spend on those processes? For you, I think I should prescribe this, because I feel like doing an hour a day is not enough, 2 hours a day probably is enough, and 3 to 4 hours is the sweet spot in terms of revision. That's pretty much what I did on average to study for my A-Levels, and I'm predicted for A stars. What you need to do is to pick 2 study times, both of which you can spend 2 hours on. So when I was revising for my A-Levels, what I did was I put my first study time at 6 a.m. and I put my second study time at 3 p.m. So I was studying between 6 and 8 to 9 every single day, and I was studying from 3 to 5 p.m. every single day. The reason why this works is because when you have a routine, doing something different at 6 a.m. or 3 p.m. will feel so weird to the point where you would rather just be sitting down and working. And what you do in those 2 hour blocks is the study process that we spoke about in step 3. Depending on what time of year it is, what you need to be doing, all you should ever realistically be doing at any point during the year is learning new content, remembering new content, and practicing questions on that content. Now we spoke about routines and processes. Step 5 is something that I've been speaking about quite a bit recently on the channel, and it's about developing intuition from experience. If you're someone who's already pretty decent at revising, maybe all of the ideas about routines and processes sound quite familiar already. Even if it all sounded familiar and you're still not getting results, it simply means, as bluntly as possible, your routines and your processes simply don't work. The hardest part about finding processes that actually work is that you constantly need to fail and then adjust it according to that failure. And this is where developing intuition from experience comes in. What intuition is but you pretty much just know inside that something works for you or something doesn't work for you. This is only developed if you have experience. So what you need to do is to have a process, a set of 3 or 4 different steps, follow those steps for a certain exam, and see how those results end up. It's likely that it won't be a total failure. There'll be some parts of that process that do work really well for you, and there will be some parts that don't work at all, or that just need slight adjusting so that they can be better in future. Your aim should be to improve on your processes as opposed to getting better results. Results happen as a consequence of your processes, and when you have better processes, you're more likely to get better results. So yeah, I know step 5 isn't the most actionable or practical of advice, but it is the advice that you need to carry out and find out for yourself. What actually works for you, you just need to try out different things constantly until you find the thing that sticks for you. So yeah, if you did find this video useful, I've got a Discord down below in my description, and I've also got the product coming out on 14th of August, I've mentioned a couple times already. So if you're interested in any of those are the top 2 links in my description. But before then, I'll see you in the next video.